You were conditioned to be likable, taught to avoid conflict, to go along, to be nice. But Carl Jung would argue that niceness is just a facade. And if you're not vigilant, it becomes a cage. Because being agreeable doesn't mean you're kind. It means you vanish. You don't gain respect by always agreeing. You don't get more affection by being accommodating. You don't create peace by staying quiet. You simply fade away and no one even sees it. You believe you're being supportive, helpful, easygoing, but in truth, you're neglecting yourself. And with each instance, you show the world that your needs don't count, that your time is up for grabs, that your limits are flexible, that your silence equals consent. And it didn't label people-pleasing as kindness, he saw it as the shadow's camouflage. A behavioral shield to avoid rejection, arguments, or abandonment. But here's the reality. The more you give in, the more you get exploited. Not due to people's malice, but because they react to your boundaries or lack of them. And when you hide the part of you that wants to refuse, to resist, to walk away, you end up an outline, a mold shaped to suit others' desires. One day you'll find yourself asking why you feel drained, why bitterness creeps, why everything seems fake, why no one truly understands you. And Jung called this the persona, the mask you were trained to wear. The persona is the you crafted by your family, your society, your mentors to conform, to be liked, to earn approval, to avoid punishment, to survive. And at first it was necessary, it still is to some extent. You can't roam through life blurting every thought, acting on every emotion. You need a social face for order, for roles, for coexistence. But Jung warned of a hidden threat. When you start believing the mask is who you are, you begin to lose your essence because you weren't meant to be pleasant. You were born to be authentic. You weren't designed to fit into other people's stories. You were meant to write your own. But you can't do that if your instinct is to keep everyone at ease. And that's what most pleasers fail to notice until the damage is done. Every time you avoid a no, you're saying yes to self-neglect. That's the hidden toll of being liked. You think the price of honesty is friction, but the real cost is bitterness. You think denying someone is selfish, but the actual selfishness is staying quiet while resenting others for missing what you never voiced. You believe making others happy is admirable, but true integrity is drawing clear lines, so people never have to guess who you are. Jung recognized that suppressing the self leads to distortion. And when you deny your anger, your instincts, your truth, you don't get kinder. You become bitterly agreeable, emotionally distant, passive-aggressive, because a part of you knows you're not being real. You're acting. You're editing. You're controlling reactions instead of expressing yourself. And sooner or later, your body reveals the truth. Constant exhaustion, burnout, fear of upsetting others, dissecting every message, second-guessing every exchange. That's not emotional intelligence. That's psychological captivity. And it only intensifies because the more you accommodate, the more others expect it. You teach them to disregard you. And they do, not always out of cruelty, but because you've conditioned them to believe your no doesn't exist. Real love requires being seen. But the people you're trying to please, they don't see you. They only know the version you constructed, and now you're terrified to shift. Because if you set a boundary, they'll accuse you of changing. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've grown cold. But the truth is, they've just grown used to your silence, your submission, your endless softness. And when you stop pretending, it feels harsh, not because it's cruel, but because your honesty finally has armor. Jung would call this the birth of individuation. Individuation isn't about fixing yourself. It's about claiming yourself. It's the journey of becoming an integrated human being who can stand tall, with a shadow, a voice, and a no that matters. Until you reach that place, you'll always feel incomplete, like something's missing, like your life belongs to someone else. That's not sadness. That's your real self begging to wake up, breaking through the smiles, smashing through your polite replies, clawing out of the narrative you've been playing for years. And the escape route is simple. Stop performing. When you stop pleasing, people will squirm. Some will lash out. Some will walk away. Some will guilt you into softening again. Let them. That's not harshness. That's precision. Because your purpose isn't to make others happy. It's to become whole. To speak with honesty. To set limits that disappoint others but safeguard your being. To leave behind anyone who only embraced you when you were easy to handle. Jung would insist this isn't cruelty. This is a breakthrough. And now we delve into the psychology of waking up. Why the compulsion to please begins in childhood. How to spot when your mask is in control. And how to dismantle the habit without losing yourself or your connections. Jung didn't refer to it as being nice. He called it a betrayal of the inner self because you weren't born like this. You didn't show up on earth hoping to be agreeable. You weren't made to say yes when you meant no. You weren't built to bury your truth for comfort. You were trained, molded, programmed. And the cruelest part is you mistook it for love. You thought staying quiet showed maturity. You thought giving up your needs showed generosity. You thought hiding your emotions showed strength. But all it really did was erase you. And the person they care for, the one they praise and depend on, that's not you. That's your mask. The persona explained. Jung defined the persona as the mask adopted to meet the expectations of the world. It isn't false. It's adaptive. You use it in school, at work, in relationships, in society. It helps you belong. It helps you navigate. But if you begin to think the mask is you, if you forget the line between the role and the soul, you lose your most valuable asset, authenticity. This is the dilemma for people pleasers. In early life, they discovered that honesty led to rejection. That showing frustration led to punishment. That having needs led to being labeled selfish. So they adjusted, they smiled instead of cried. They agreed when they wanted to protest. They minimized themselves so others could shine. They learned that affection had to be earned with performance. So the mask became their identity. What Jung grasped that modern psychology often overlooks, while today's advice tells you to speak up. Draw lines, practice self-care. Jung looked deeper. He saw people pleasing not just as a habit, but a wound in the soul. Because when you discard your real self over and over, you don't just silence your voice. You erase who you are. You begin to wonder, who am I without this act? What if they abandon me when I stop giving? Will anyone still be here if I speak up? These aren't just fears. They're survival scripts from a time when your safety depended on being accepted. And now you've confused being accepted with being secure. But every time you trade truth for safety, you shrink a little further. You become indispensable yet unseen. And here's the painful secret most won't say. The people pleasers loved, but the love feels fake. Because deep down, they love a performance, not a person. They love the agreeable version. The one who never complains. The one who adapts. But what about when you're tired? When you can't give? When you finally draw a line? That's when the affection fades. And what's left is guilt, silence, doubt. But Jung would say good. Because that's where your actual life begins. Individuation, the shift from pleasing to becoming. Individuation is the remedy for this pattern. It's the process of reclaiming the parts you exiled for acceptance. The rage, the pride, the selfishness, the truth. It's not about perfection, it's about becoming whole. It's saying, yes, I care, but I count too. Yes, I want peace, but not if it costs me my truth. Yes, I love you, but I won't abandon myself to stay with you. That's not rebellion. That's wisdom. And if they can't accept that, let them go. Because Jung believed the true self doesn't appear through acceptance. It rises through resistance. Through confronting those who fed on your silence. Through letting down those who only loved your submission. Through risking solitude to live honestly. And here's the irony. When you stop pleasing, you don't lose real connection. You lose lopsided ones. You lose those who benefited from your silence and make space for those who value your voice. How to recognize if your mask is in charge. Jung said, the persona is dangerous when it becomes too rigid. When you're always the calm one, always the cheerful one, always the responsible, always the forgiving one. Then it stops being a tool. It becomes your prison. And you'll know you're stuck when you're drained after being around people. You overthink every interaction. You're terrified of saying no. You agree from fear, not desire. You feel unknown even with those closest to you. These aren't small issues. They are the cracks in the mask. And the longer you act, the more disconnected you become. Not because you're weak, but because the mask became too real, even to you. But here's what matters. The moment you see it, you can shift. You don't need consent. You don't need approval. You need boldness, the boldness to pause before a yes, the boldness to let others down, the boldness to walk away from validation and walk into truth. Jung never wanted you to be rude he wanted you to become so aligned with your own reality that no one could manipulate you again. And now we'll break that down. How to stop apologizing for your peace. How to rebuild your identity beyond the nice label. And how to become someone others admire, not just tolerate, without becoming fake, harsh, or cold. At this point, something inside you is stirring. You're beginning to see how much of your life has been scripted. How much of your sense of self came from appeasement. How many times you said yes while screaming no internally. And maybe now, for the first time, you're wondering who you are without all the pleasing. That's not a simple question. It's not about tweaking behavior. It's about revising your entire self-concept. Jung understood that deeply. Because when you stop being a people pleaser, you don't just lose a habit, you shed a version of yourself. And what emerges isn't cruel or hardened. It's someone authentic. Someone who doesn't need to be liked to feel secure. Someone who doesn't crave approval to feel alive. Someone who can say no with clarity and yes with presence. That's real individuation, not a spiritual cliche, not moral superiority. But truth turned into identity, so what does it take to get there? Let's break it down one step at a time. 1. Recognize the guilt loop for what it is. When you first stop pleasing people, you'll feel guilt. You'll feel it in your chest, in your gut, in the silence afterward. You'll feel like you're being mean, like you're letting someone down, like you're doing something wrong. But Jung would say that's not guilt, that's withdrawal. You're detoxing from the need to be liked. You're experiencing the emotional hangover of reclaiming your power after handing it away for years. Of course it feels heavy, but that weight isn't proof that you're wrong. It's proof that you're finally shifting. Let the guilt come. Don't fight it. Don't justify it. Don't run from it. Feel it and do the right thing anyway. That's how your strength returns in the moment when guilt no longer governs your behavior. 2. Redefine your value. Pleasers get their sense of worth from being useful. If you're helpful, you feel wanted. If you're needed, you feel secure. If you're liked, you feel important. But Jung would say that's not value. That's conditional identity. And the danger? The moment you're no longer helpful, you feel replaceable. So here's the work. Redefine your worth, not based on your usefulness, not on your sacrifice, not on how little space you take up, but on your truth, your voice, your presence, your ability to be fully yourself, even when that upsets others. That's where your value lives, not in what you do for them, but in what you refuse to do against yourself. 3. Learn to disappoint without apology. Make this your next milestone. You can let people down and still be kind, still be good, still be worthy. You can say no without justifying it, without explaining it, without softening it to cushion someone's ego. Because every time you dilute your boundary to protect another's comfort, you reinforce the lie that your needs are dangerous. They're not. They're sacred. Jung believed that integrating your shadow is what leads to wholeness, and your ability to be misunderstood without crumbling. That's shadow work. You're not here to regulate everyone's feelings. You're here to stay rooted in who you are, even when it makes others uncomfortable. 4. Start small. Stay firm. You don't need to shout your transformation. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to confront everyone who underestimates you. Just begin quietly. Don't respond instantly. Don't justify every no. Don't over-apologize for things that aren't wrong. Don't offer more than you want to give. Let it be subtle. Let it be steady. And then watch. People start to recalibrate around you. They stop pushing. They stop assuming. They stop draining because you've taught them through your stillness, your clarity, your peace, that you're no longer available for sacrifice. You're available for truth. 5. Embody the new standard. Once you stop pleasing, your energy shifts. People who fed on your softness will slip away. Let them. That's the evidence you weren't loved. You were used. And in the quiet of their absence, new people will arrive. People who respect your pause, who meet your honesty, who support your growth, who love you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. But this only happens if you hold the new standard. Not once, not when it's convenient, but every day and every moment when the old you wants to resurface. Don't fold. Notice the reflex. Stay grounded. Breathe through it. Because every moment you refuse to betray yourself, you get stronger. And that grounded, calm, quiet strength is what Jung believed leads to actual healing. Not external applause, but internal unity. Final words. You won't stop people pleasing because you've become hard. You'll stop because you've become awake. Carl Jung never wanted you to be cruel. He wanted you to be conscious. To stop performing. To stop begging. To stop slicing your soul into pieces for people who wouldn't even lift a finger for you. He wanted you to become someone who is calm in their real in their presence, steady in their discomfort, whole, even when others don't like it. Because the ones who are truly healed aren't the ones who are liked by everyone. They're the ones who are finally free.